We are live drafting on the RotoViz YouTube channel and the FFPC Best Ball Contest. It's myself, it's Conor O'Driscoll. We are right about to kick off the draft. In fact, there is 2 picks in here, and we get Christian McCaffrey, Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson off the board. It is interesting because after we jumped in this draft, we also found out that one of our buddies is at that spot number 3. We'll reveal who that is in a couple of moments. We're up here at spot number 5. Draco, we're going to talk about the plays that we cannot pass in drafts this season. If it's me solo, this is Tyreek Hill. Is there a name that you want to pitch for Overhill on the clock here for this pick?
Tyreek is an easy pick here.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the authority to make the picks. Me and Sean had an incident, and it might even have been in the FFPC main event where we got a different player when neither of us took full control as to who was going to get selected at a certain pick. So we'll add players to the queue from both sides. We'll let Draco make the clicks. I mentioned, though, this is going to be players that are must draft, absolute smashes that we cannot pass in drafts. I do think when you get to the 105 and you have the option for Tyreek Hill, that is one of those instances. I also think that all the picks through those first 5 picks, and Christian McCaffrey, CeeDee Lamb, Bijan Robinson, and Breece Hall, along with Tyreek Hill, fit that category. The picks after that are Justin Jefferson and Amon-Ra. So in the first round, it's not that hard to say players must draft, but we get Tyreek Hill. We'll see how the rest of the draft continues to progress here. This is the FFPC Best Ball Tournament, and I wouldn't be doing ourselves justice at this point, Conor, if I didn't say that Conor is a former winner of this contest. Conor always likes to remind me, though, that the year he won it, that me and Sean, along with Blair Andrews, came in second place. So that was a 1-2 finish for the RotoViz crew. We're hoping to do similar things this year. We are drafting in this draft. It's a $125 buy-in, and the top prize this year is $300,000. The FFPC can be found at myffpc.com. It has been wide receiver heavy, as we would expect through that first round. For people not as familiar with the FFPC, in past years, we would have seen more running back heavy approaches. That may still be the case as the rest of the draft goes versus what we will try and do in our part of the draft here, Conor. But as I mentioned, as a former winner, have you changed any strategic elements to your drafting in this contest this year versus previous years?
So the big thing this year, I think there's 2 big things this year. One is you get such fantastic values on the early tight ends now.
Yep.
But the later tight ends kind of stink. So it is really a race to fill up that tight end spot before they start to sink. Brock Bowers, obviously, to me, the obvious kind of cutoff point there, where you really do want 2 of those guys before Brock Bowers goes off the board. Much easier said than done. Then the other piece is, I think there is a lot more appealing late round quarterbacks than normal. With the likes of Drake May, Justin Fields, and a bunch of others, that makes waiting on quarterback much more appealing than normal. So I would think those are the big pieces.
I would agree with the QB. The QB is interesting as well, though, because we have seen some of those prices, increase over the last 2 weeks, so it makes it a little bit trickier. The likes of a Bo Nix fitting into that structure, even a Justin Fields who could be got a lot cheaper. And you mentioned the pricing of the tight end position. Well, in this so far, Trey McBride went at the 201. Sam Laporta has gone to the drafter at the 9 slot. So some of the names we may have been hoping to get in those 2, and then Travis Kelce goes to the drafter at the 8 slot. So the tight end going heavy here, as we would expect. When those names are gone, who is some of your preferred options? Are you drafting much Mark Andrews this year? Or who are you seeing now at this next pick potentially as a tight end selection? Or are you looking into the likes of, Drake London, probably Dalton Kincaid, I think is the answer to this question. But any of the other names here?
Let's hope the 6 doesn't take him off us, but the obvious answer is Dalton Kincaid, where you do get some strong tight end use there in the second round, and then you feel a lot more comfortable about the position. Obviously, there's the temptation to hope that you get Kittle at 408 or Bowers at 505, but that becomes a much riskier proposition. So I think it is just Dalton Kincaid here.
Yeah, he does make it to us, so he is the one I would select. You mentioned, some of the names that might get to you in the not in the later rounds, but 2 rounds later, 3 rounds later. I'm looking, as you touched that already, for those to be my second tight end if it comes to getting some draft luck and those guys making it back to you. So the one thing I've been interested in, this is tight end premium for people that haven't drafted on the FFPC before. Tight end premium PPR format. This particular league is not super flex. Start 1 quarterback, so you can start 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, 1 tight end, and then 2 flex positions. So if you do have 2 tight ends that become at the elite level, scoring high volume points on a weekly basis, they slot into that lineup. And that is a case where that would be one of your flexes. Ideally, in our builds, and this for myself and Conor, we're probably looking at situations where you start 2 running backs, 3 or 4 wide receivers, and then 1 or 2 tight ends based on the flex allocations. So that can be done.
We obviously haven't revealed who the 3 whole drafters.
Yeah. We hold that off to the next pick, or
is it one of those FFPC boomers who just
let's do this, right? I see we do have some people in watching in the live room. The drafter in spot 3. I am going to let people pitch in some guesses as to who it may be. Somebody that myself and Conor are very familiar with, who we would rather if they were not in this draft room. But it is interesting that it's a running back start. But I do know that exact person thinks that Kyren Williams is one of the most mispriced running backs in this season's ADP across a wide range of formats. So it's an RB start for that drafter. Let us know in the chat who that may be. We will reveal it maybe before we get to our pick in round 4 to have some fun with it. But yeah, I was surprised, Conor, as to how much, and maybe it's like me and you and like 1 or 2 other people, but I thought I was going to be on an island this year with the double elite tight end approach. But I have found, obviously, maybe we're just in a little bit of a bubble, that it is, a preferred strategy rather than something that we would think is, in our group anyway, a little bit contrarian. But I still think it is contrarian across the market in general for drafting in these particular leagues.
Yeah, so I think you're right. It has definitely become more popular this year, and part of that is the price. Like, when's the last time the tight end won? It's very rare that the tight end one has an ADP in the second round, and that you have these kind of young players that could really, really emerge. I
think if this was previous seasons, like we had 5 tight ends go in the second round. And I think if this is previous seasons, like Kincaid and McBride probably don't get pulled up as high as they are. But I think people now they're getting more aware of like players taking the leap then, and the younger age groups pushing themselves that little bit higher then.
I definitely agree there, and I have noticed that it was. Like the double elite strategy, it was used before, but now it's not uncommon at all to get into draft rooms where you 4 double tight end rooms teams.
We are back up on the clock, just as you say that. There is a couple of players I've added to the queue, but we're talking about the must draft players. I have a couple of names here I'm interested in, and I do know that one of these players is your preferred player to select in the round 3. So I'm going to leave this one a little bit up to you. The players I've added to the queue are Debo, Jalen Waddle, and Malik Neighbors. Who is the player you'd prefer to have here at the 3rd round?
Honestly,
or have you a different name?
These all seem pretty close to me. I don't have a clear preference on them.
So what it would be a case of if
you're clearly Debo, which I think is where you are, that's completely fine with me.
I would be between Debo and Neighbors unless we wanted to set up some sort of Dolphins stack as we walk through the rest of this draft and get to add into that. If you're not interested in that, it would be Debo or Neighbors.
Okay, let's do Debo.
Okay.
Let's do Debo.
The reason that I sometimes in these drafts we're balancing out the exposure. The exposure, and I don't know if yours is the same for Neighbors, is getting a little high. When I'm doing multiple of these drafts in a week and you start to look at like how is it playing out at this point, some of the names are almost frightening at the levels that they're being drafted. Neighbors is a player who at this point of draft season, I think there's no chance of him sliding back. Maybe a month ago you could have seen him falling into round 4. The part with these fields when we're looking at the FFPC, like if we were doing this in underdog, you'd be trying to get Waddle there, then trying to get into your Tua later on to have that Dolphins element to it. But in this particular format, I believe the final field for this contest is 76 teams, if I'm remembering correctly. And that leads to situations where having massive stacks isn't as essential as it would be in those huge final fields over on underdog. Would you find it the same? Are you prioritizing stacks less on FFPC versus if you were doing an underdog draft?
So I think actually you can build out a bigger stack on FFPC than you can in the bigger fields. So with FFPC, you've got two components. One, with less people in your field, you don't need the score to be quite as high, and so with a really high threshold, you're pushed more towards single stacks, because usually there's only one player on that team who can beat a nuts and attack PPR. So the secondary player, it's harder when one goes nuclear. It's harder for the other one to give a strong score as well, because you don't get the benefit of PPR. Whereas this one, the score, you don't need the nuts, and then it's easier for your secondary player to get there too. Now that maybe that sounds counterintuitive that we didn't do Tyreek and then Waddle, but I think when you're paying this high a price, the stacking consideration can be it's a little bit less important, I think.
Yeah, well, my preference is that it is that little bit less important, and you can build out some cheaper stacks a little bit later on at a lower cost. I also really do love Deebo Samuel at that third round cost, but sometimes when you get into a draft and you are looking at the board and you're thinking, well, a little bit like we felt with that Kincaid pick, that he was the real pick that we had to have. When we're there with those three options approaching us, 2 picks to go, I'm pretty comfortable with whichever one of them that we add to the roster. So I'm kind of adding those names across the board. I do have a tier split then to get down to, the Devontae Smith, DK Metcalf, Brandon Ayuk tier at that particular point. So I just think Deebo, again, there's so many ways that he can score, week to week. It's not all based on a single kind of formula. And I always feel like he is a key part of the game plan for the 49ers, no matter way we look at it. So like adding him there, would have been interested in going Waddle as well. But to be honest, I would have also been very interested in going with Neighbors. I did kind of do the split on the Waddle pick based on if we don't want to just load up completely on the Dolphins. So we're 1 pick away, and this is where we start to get into some of the strategic elements of our targets versus other targets. And one part of it that could get interesting with the Waddle pick is you had mentioned the possibility of George Kittle. We are 1 pick away. I wouldn't be against taking Kittle here and then later in the draft looking to get to build out that looking to get Purdy to build out the 49ers element of it. If you want to go that particular direction, I think it's an interesting way to play the 49ers.
I think that's pretty strong as well.
That was one of the reasons why I would be okay, and now it could all fall apart here. There's 20 seconds left on the clock. That was one of the reasons I'd be okay playing the option of passing on Waddle to try and go the 49ers route.
So yeah, I'm happy to do Kittle here. Very happy to do Kittle.
Yeah, let's try that. Other players you have in the queue here at this point, I know Diggs is one of your favorite targets as well in this area. I like Zay Flowers. There's quite a few week 14 wide receivers that come up in this zone that are very interesting. Then you get the likes of Tank Dell, T. Higgins. There is a wide range. I do feel like we can probably.
I know you don't like the week 14 exposure.
Yeah, I was going to get to that. The week 14, myself and Connor have drafted a number of these in the slow format, and it tends to be from pick 1 the entire way through to Bo Nix is available that I discuss week 14 because Connor does not have a fear of bye weeks. Do you want to talk explicitly about your lacking of concern for bye weeks of any kind while we're on the stream here?
Okay, yeah, that's so I wouldn't say I have a lack of fear for bye weeks of any kind. I would say that I'm predominantly concerned with buys at tight end and quarterback because you're selecting less overall pick. Yeah, the onesies, because you're selecting less of them, and it's much more impactful. Whereas you only have to start 2 wide receivers, you only have to start 2 running backs, and then often you'll get 6 running backs, you'll get 8 wide receivers. So that's a pool of 14, and you have to play normally you'll want to play 6 players out of that 14 if you're including the 2 flex spots. So if you have a couple of flex spot bye week overlap, I honestly think that's fine. And then you obviously you do lose some points on week 14 when your amount of players available is less, but you also do make up a lot of those points back by having less players on buys on other weeks. So it's not a total wash. And so I think it's a good tiebreaker away. It's a fine tiebreaker if you have 3 week 14 buys and you're tied between a week 6 buy guy and a week 14. It's completely fine to pick the week 6 guy because of that. But I think if you clearly prefer another player who has a week 14 bye, I don't think the bye week in that particular scenario should push you off it.
Yeah, and the fun thing about this is when we're having these conversations over, WhatsApp or over text messages, sometimes the nuance gets kind of lost, and we go into maybe joking a bit more about it. But
yeah, we just start making fun of each other.
Yeah, basically. The reason I like to factor it in is when it gets to later in the draft, I'm pretty much drafting exclusively in the Broncos rounds, Broncos players. So trying to balance that out. But it's more a case of, all the reasons that you may or may not want to make a pick at a certain pick. And I find when you're doing the slow drafts, it's fun to kind of talk through the overall strategy and the elements that are involved in it, rather than it be like, yeah, we can't do this. I just like bringing it up. But it felt like we drafted a couple of teams. I think we drafted maybe a Lamar team, and another team may have had Jaden Daniels on it. So we had week 14 linked into them. So it felt like every conversation was around week 14, which was fun. So we'll see if we get into any week 14 conversations here. But Conor, so far through this draft... Yep. Well, we've definitely avoided the week 14 conversation. Can we get into the week 9 conversation? We will reveal who that drafter is in spot 3 as well in just a moment. They did just draft Brock Bowers. If that gives any hints as to who it may be, I did joke with Conor before we started that, sniping him on Brock Bowers may be a step too far. So we didn't do that. We took George Kittle. Brock Bowers comes off the board on the way back. 2 picks away, though, I did. Zay Flowers went. He would have been a fun name. Next up is probably T. Higgins would be my preferred option here. Have you any other names to pitch in?
No, I'm glad I was really hoping we would get one of those 2 guys. I think I see it as a pretty big tier gap. Often you will get Tank Dell in this range as well. He's not there, so it's been a pretty heavy wide receiver turn. So definitely happy to get the cutoff in T. Higgins.
Yeah, so just for people who are listening in on audio, since Josh Allen went off the board at the middle of the 4th round, it's been Rashee Rice, DJ Moore. We took George Kittle, and it was Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell, Michael Pittman, Patrick Mahomes, James Cook, Jake Ferguson, Brock Bowers, Zay Flowers, and then we took T. Higgins. So you mentioned Tank Dell. He did go, 6 or so picks ahead. Then if we look at the wide receiver, if we're talking about the wide receiver avalanche or the wide receiver window, it's Amari Cooper, George Pickens, Terry McLaurin, Christian Kirk, Chris Godwin, Calvin Ridley. Then we're down to Xavier Worthy and Keenan Allen. Feel free if you want to add Xavier Worthy to the queue here. That would be one that the drafter in third is very interesting.
We can put him in the queue and then watch as he
gets drafted. Yeah, that's probably what's going to happen here. But yeah, fun way to play out so far. And one of the other reasons that I did not mind passing on Waddle. If we didn't have Hill, I would love to have Waddle on this roster. The reason I'm kind of thinking about potentially passing on Waddle there is this other player in Xavier Worthy as a week 6 bye as well. And you know how I like to talk about buys, Conor. Have to add that in.
You're a big fan of avoiding overlapping buys.
But maybe that happens and Worthy doesn't get back. Obviously his ADP is coming up all the time, but there is, a bunch of players, and particular quarterback as well. We've seen Lamar Jackson sit there, Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud. So lots of Kyler Murray, lots of quarterback options here. Hopefully some of them maybe slide off the board and allow that player to get to us. Revealing the player or the drafter in spot 3, That is Mr. Sean Siegel. So you do not want to be in draft rooms against Sean. He starts off with running back with Bijan and Kyron, takes Kyle Pitts, then Tank Dell, then Brock Bowers. So when we're mentioning, the players that might be available at that tier, when Sean took Dell, I was concerned that we were not getting Zay Flowers or T. Higgins back to our spot. Thankfully, we did get Higgins back to us. Concern now for me as Worthy now, if we're looking at the ADBQ on the FFPC, he's just popped in there at the bottom of it. So that catches people's eyes if they're not as hungry for Worthy as we are. Some other, wide receivers that
he's
I
in
mentioned
the viewing
earlier.
window now.
Yeah, he's catching a glimpse of some people's eyes. So we'll see. We have 4 more picks before we would pick. Any other players that you want to mention as Lamar Jackson does go off the board, that if he doesn't get to us, who's your kind of... I've drafted a lot of Keenan Allen. He's kind of an easy smash for me, but we are into a range here where JSN could come into the conversation, and then you're starting to look, I think, at some of the running back names if they remained available. The likes of a James Conner would be somebody who I've drafted quite a bit of in the super flex version of the contest, but I would be very happy to pass on that and to continue to push running back another round or so. Any wide receivers or even potentially any of the quarterbacks that would appetize you here at this point?
So I think it's interesting you mentioned Keenan Allen. There goes Wordy. So it's interesting that you mentioned Keenan Allen because normally you get him pretty reliably in the 7th round. Sean is not going to pass on Keenan Allen twice.
No.
So I think we just take him here. He's obviously going to take JSN, and then we'll figure it out from there.
Yeah, so it's up to you. Have you a preference between Allen and JSN?
I have a lot of Allen. I don't have as much.
Let's go JSN, just for Sean to have some reactions to.
Okay.
How do you feel about it before you click it? I think it's close, and I would rather jump at the young player in those situations.
Yeah, it's pretty close. It is pretty close.
Let's go JSN. So we are now up to Tyreek Hill.
As well is we already have a lot of quarterback stacking potential.
Yeah.
So Geno Smith way less appealing than Caleb Williams.
That is true as well, but also we can get him. I have a lot. When you say way less appealing, are you saying that you would rather have Williams there on your roster or Smith? I have a lot of Geno this year.
Oh, I'd rather have Caleb Williams than Geno.
Okay, so you'd rather stack up the Bears from that element than
Yeah.
I like stacking up and it's mainly, again, I'm talking the super flex, having the option to kind of pass on a lot of quarterbacks in those early stages and then move into that Geno Smith tier.
That's a different conversation when the opportunity cost.
And I think
round, single QB pick. Whereas here it's like, you can get Caleb Williams in the 9th or 10th. That's a pretty good price.
Yeah, we can still go a lot further down and be able to get ourselves some Geno as well. I think that solo, I would rather go solo with JSN. You may be correct in the stacking side of things. Then when we look at the Bears, if you were going fully out for that, who knows? Sean did go with Jaden Reed. I think his plan is take the young player. I think he's thinking the same way as I am, that maybe Allen sneaks his way back, and I would imagine that he's going to take Keenan Allen, as you mentioned, on the way back. Looking at the roster, CJ Stroud went 1 pick before his pick. He does have Tank Dell. Maybe that would have been a direction he would have went, but the drafter that took CJ Stroud does have Collins and Diggs. They're building out a nice roster that also has Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews, so stacking out some fun elements there to that team along with CD Lamb. So nice.
I've drafted next to Lemmings before the 104 before.
Yeah,
he's a good drafter. He's tough drafting next to. He will.
This is a challenge in
targets.
Yeah, we've been lucky so far that we've got a lot of the guys we wanted outside of Worthy there who we missed out on. But we can't, you have to balance it. You can't have every pick that you want throughout the draft. When we're talking about smash picks that you have to have, he is my one in this range. Sean does to Keenan Allen that makes us have to go into some conversations. This is probably a jumping off point for running backs unless we want to dive down even further, you know, Christian Watson, Rome Odunze could be our bear that we take if we want to do that. But we are moving down there, you know, 20 picks by ADP. Who are you looking at here? You know, obviously
So I
Warren would
think
have been a target, but
if
he
we
is his
wanted
hamstring.
if we wanted a receiver, it would be Odunze. Especially with Deontay off there. And so that would be a 9 pick reach by ADP. The ADP on the site is not accurate.
Yeah, it's not fully lit up.
We've no interest in Kyler.
No, and I think Purdy's in the next round, and the running back I'd probably go for based on current health would probably be Javonte over Warren. So I'm good with Odunze if you wanna go that direction.
I think it is just Odunze then.
Okay.
Because
how do you feel now? Again, talking through the overall, you know, strategy, we passed on Waddle, and I mentioned part of that reason was I was, you know, hoping to get Worthy, so we don't get that, so that really didn't matter. So I'll ask you, in that situation, would you prefer to have Waddle over Debo? That I think will come into a clear picture in the next round, where we might be starting to look into that picture of, do you want to take Purdy? The only other team, unless somebody goes completely unstacked with Purdy, would be the team in 1 who has already taken Patrick Mahomes, but you could see them with Christian McCaffrey maybe even look that way. The part is basically, I think if we take Keenan Allen in that last pick, Sean takes Jaden Reed and JSN, so you could have got Allen, Odunze, and then been looking into, you know, building out the Bears. What's your thoughts on those kind of couple of picks, and how are you feeling about the roster so far?
So I just before I get into that, the 4 drafter, I actually know him. I've met him a couple of times. He lives in Columbus too.
Okay.
And he's a big RotoViz reader, big ship chasing fan. So he is not enjoying being sandwiched between us and.
I don't think so.
He started off pretty good though, and then in terms of our picks, I think we've built a very strong team here. We have our 5 receivers through 7.
Through 7, yeah.
We have that kind of mix of established stars, and then rising young guns who could end up being top 5 receivers on the season, if things break their way, particularly by the end of the year. I think that the way we've gone JSN, Odunze, getting the young guys there, we've got a lot of options there. We can do Caleb, we can do Geno if we miss on Caleb. We can do is Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow's still on the board. That would be pretty appealing in the 8th round. I would be Burrow over Purdy. I don't know how you feel about that, but I would be pretty strongly about that. There goes Javonte.
My boy.
And so then, obviously, we love our start here, but the other thing, and this is what I love about FFPC, so you've gotten the start that you wanted. The challenge now is how do we jump off now from like 5 wide receivers, 2 tight ends, into rounding out the rest of our roster, without sacrificing too much. That is our challenge here, and there's a couple of ways we can do it. Not sure if we do want to take a quarterback here. That would be make it a little bit easier on the quarterback side, and then we would just be taking a lot of running backs at the end, or we can open things up with running back here, and feel very good about our running back room, and maybe have a little bit more fragility in our quarterback room. That's the trade-off we're looking at.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're looking at here. And you mentioned Burrow. Burrow does go off the board just a couple of picks ago there, so that means that we're in a situation now with Burrow off the board that obviously is no longer factored in.
Right, he's no longer an option. Yeah. He's one of our outs who's now no longer
gone. But we have a lot of options, and you even mentioned the decision, potentially between Geno Smith and Caleb Williams. So we have that to come later on as well. Purdy is somebody who would fit into the conversation. I would have to guess very strongly that Sean wouldn't be going to draft Purdy in this particular room with what he's built out so far. So that would lead to, I would risk him through this round and see does he make his way back. And then I feel like we're probably into a conversation at the running back position. It's going to be a challenging room. You mentioned some of the potential pitfalls to that. We do have the drafter in 11 as well, who has taken Raheem Mostert, but outside of that, it was one quarterback, one tight end, the rest wide receivers. So they have their 5 receivers through 8 rounds. The team in 7 is all wide receivers bar Josh Jacobs. So we have a couple of very heavy wide receiver led builds, which will make some of those competitions for drafting those running backs that we might like a little bit more. This is an area again, Sean has taken 2 running backs in the opening 2 rounds, so he's probably going to pass. But I am interested in a number of the running back names here, unless you wanted to go for Jameson Williams at wide receiver. Hit me with your thoughts here. What would you prefer?
So I like your analysis there that we have lots of wide receiver heavy starts in this room. And so lots of other teams will kind of be prioritizing the same kind of build as us.
Yeah, like we could see a 2-round gap where a lot of those running backs go off the board. I nearly think that taking at least one here, seeing then if we have a fallback for Purdy versus the rest. But the other part of that is if you think we need to be aggressive and get that additional wide receiver, I'm pretty good with the 5 through 7 that we have. What way do you want to go as we're back on the clock?
So I like Chase Brown here. Where we get another Bengal, and then that gives us a little bit more correlation with some Broncos late stuff.
Yeah, I think that he's the clear running back pick here.
I agree. I strongly agree. He's the only guy I have in the queue.
Yeah, and let's do that because I did mention my love for the Broncos and doing that sort of stuff late. But when we are looking at those, it's very easy to pad in a few of them, potentially even, add a Bo Nix if the price is right. And that opens it up for the correlation, as you mentioned, between him and T. Higgins. So when we're looking at the running backs that are available there, Zamir White is after ADP. Sometimes in drafts he could come all the way back. He's not somebody that I'm drafting, but the other running backs in this area, Warren, Brooks, sometimes they'll slide through with the injury concerns. And then we have Brian Robinson, Tyjae Spears, Zach Moss, Devin Singletary. We start to really get quite deep into the 0 RB guys from that point forward. Sean does take Jameson Williams, which I was kind of expecting based on the running back start that he had. He now has 4 wide receivers through 8 rounds, and there'll be some concern, I'm sure, when he's drafting that team about that being kind of the wide receiver cliff. I know that probably Jerry Jeudy becomes the next wide receiver he's really looking to get. So I think we're in a good place about what we've done. But if we look through the running backs off the board so far, we are down to running back 27 as we took our first one. So we were the last team in the draft to take a running back, but we're down to running back 27. So that leaves
we get the official hardest 0 RB drafters in the room.
Yeah, we're the toughest dudes in the 0 RB streets. I think that's what confirms it here now, Connor.
Actually, no, we're the second toughest. 4 hasn't taken a running back yet.
4 has not taken a running back yet. I do say that we have failed. We have failed our task, but we do get Chase Brown, who
if Chase Brown make some money instead.
Yeah, that's the goal. If Chase Brown was gone, I do think that we push it through. I would be looking then at Tyjae Spears, Jalen Warren, Brooks. I have Spears now nudged just a little bit ahead based on the injury stuff, but I'm very happy if you get that discount. Like if Warren comes back here, he's very much in play for me. So we have a variety of ways that we can play it. And with the quarterback position, Purdy would be the next QB by ADP, and then Caleb Williams. But I would be looking to see, can we really let it play around? I'm looking to get all my quarterbacks pretty much at a discount. The drafter out of 1 does take Warren. He does have McCaffrey, Achane, Cook so far on that roster. The 2 wide receivers on board, Devontae Adams, Chris Godwin. So I would have been hoping he may have come around, but I'm looking to try and push QB down.
I don't think we get our 2 targets back here, by the way, Colm.
Yeah, you don't have to like say that to me in such an authoritative tone to just crush my spirit. The
Well,
two
no,
tar
I'm not saying it to crush your spirit. One thing that I don't like having a hope. Hey, I really hope these guys come back, and then if they don't, I'm gonna be really sad. The reason I say that is because I think we should have a plan for when and if the two sharp drafters in front of us take our targets. Who would be your preferred backup here? I think I would be interested in one of the quarterbacks because I don't really feel the need to reach down into unless you want Brian Robinson.
well,
Oh,
the reason
oh,
I don't, I
well, we don't
oh
have to.
Sean took Jordan Addison, who would have fell into it. That is a nice pick for the way his team has been built so far. To get Williams and Addison, there's a fine way to do it. Put it out into the world, Connor. Be positive, and things will
My,
work your way. We have an option here of both of them, and just because you did that, I'm going to let you pick which one you want to add to the roster for your negativity here on the stream.
well, my negativity is what you hope for the worst, or so you you hope for the worst. You plan for the worst and then you hope for the best. Um, I like Brooks. I
I
like
like
Brooks.
Brooks as well.
Um, so yeah, let's get a little bit of Brooks here.
So we are now up to two running backs. One of them injured currently, but I think that will be, short term. I think we're looking good there. Very close for me between him and Spears. I just think the upside case for Brooks, and I know people are going to say about the offense is bad. This, the Tennessee offense is probably going to be bad too. So we're in similar situations, and I just think like coming in, Spears was somebody who I really enjoyed in flashes last year, and I'm trying to get him on rosters as much as I can. But I do like Brooks at this price, the rookie coming in, and I think he could really uplift that entire system. The one tricky part is there is a potentially three-headed backfield there, but I like adding him at that particular spot. I think we're getting a discount based on where he would be if he was playing in some of these preseason games. I think he's at least a round earlier. Caleb Williams does go off the board to the DJ Moore drafter who went after us. One of the reasons I was very comfortable there on passing in that, and I would have even potentially pitched for the backup plan to be Cortland Sutton as one of those Broncos, although you can obviously get them much, much later in the draft. He did go 3 picks later. We are here though looking at, I love drafting these injured players in 2024. That seems to be my new thing, but TJ Hawkinson may sneak back around to us here. Would be a nice third tight end to have.
You do love drafting injured players. They're your
and when I say injured players, we did take Brooks. I don't really class him as an injured player, but TJ Hawkinson and Nick Chubb, I just cannot get enough for some reason this year. And they're usually going in back-to-back rounds, which can put a bullet through your roster in those spots. Tyjae Spears goes at the 9-11. I'm looking here, though, the reason I was happy to take another running back there and see what happens with quarterback is Purdy and Tua are both going to go in this zone. Outside of the team in 7, every other team has at least one quarterback. The team that didn't was the team in 6. They did take Williams. So I kind of feel pretty good that either way, we probably get one of those two names back.
We hope. We hope.
Well, the drafter that did take Cortland Sutton is a Josh Allen, Jordan Love team that also has Jalen Waddle. So again, you're at the elements of the room, but realistically, looking at how teams are being built out here, I think the want for Tua is probably a little bit less. We do see Trevor Lawrence, somebody who falls in drafts, sometimes go a little bit earlier there to the Christian Kirk drafter at the 10-01. So Brock Purdy, Tua, kind of comfortable that they might get through. We still have the backup options then later on to potentially go and get, Geno Smith. So there is options to play out here. And of course we can get Nick Chubb when he comes back here at this particular pick. So we have Hawkins and Chubb.
I'm not sure. Are you aware you don't have to take Nick Chubb in every single draft?
I thought that was the smash picks that you have to draft was the title of the stream. I know it. I'm not normally on a stream when I'm making those picks every time, but I think that he could just be rocket fuel to a roster that's set up nicely coming into week 8, week 9, and into that late season stretch. So that's why I love drafting him. Singletary and Spears have gone off the board.
I obviously mixed that. There's another Paul that I have met, and I've mixed that. I mixed them up with another guy.
I did see that in the chat. We have got confirmation that the drafter in 4 is not from Columbus or hasn't met Draco in person.
Maybe I've only met with a catfish.
It was a catfish, that's what it was. But I have to say the draft in 4 is coming along pretty strong as well. Jerome Ford goes off the board. That means that Nick Chubb now is the best value on the board. What are you feeling here? Are you willing to risk quarterback through a turn here? Are you interested in trying to see if you could even sneak 2 QBs in the window kind of range here potentially? What would be your preference? When we look at the overall board, Hawkinson went, so that makes the decision even easier. I would imagine that drafter's hoping to get Jared Goff back in the next round. It is Amon-Ra's roster. So we're looking at a situation here where there's some tight ends, some running backs, but none that I outside of Nick Chubb that I essentially am looking to really get on the roster. When we dive all the way down to the next wide receivers, it's Curtis Samuel, Tyler Lockett, Jacoby Myers. Really the next one that I'm really wanting on the roster would be Dontavian Wicks. So what are you?
My view here is none of the guys in the ADP range here are particular targets for me anyway. And so when that happens, I normally want the quarterback. Yeah,
it's a flat zone, and that's what you want. And I talked about wanting QB after ADP. We are beyond it here with Brock Purdy, and I would take.
I think that's good.
I would take Purdy for the double stack, and then I would be kind of almost hoping that we might get Tua to even sneak back to us in the following round. But I would be good here to take Purdy and see what happens. We obviously have our boy Nick Chubb as a fallback plan if we need to do that. But yeah, I quite like the way we pushed that Jonathan Brooks pick. I think, if you're looking at how a lot of people are drafting, trying to build a stack, for example, you would be at this particular point trying to push your way into that Brock Purdy pick at the 9:04, and then we pushed it around after. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do with quarterback a lot, and I talk about that sometimes on the podcast, but being able to see that work out in real time. And we were kind of fortunate there, with the multiple outs, we had options, and that allowed it to play out that way. So I'm quite pleased.
The other element there is people won't feel quite as strongly about stacking Purdy with Ayuk, because you have that probability that he might get traded.
That's very fair.
We had Kittle and Debo. Now this is I've only realized this after the fact. We have Kittle and Debo, and then the CMC drafter at 101. They were not going to be able to pick again before our next pick. So that did work out very favorably for us.
Yeah, I think I said that before we picked Chase Brown, where I talked about he had Patrick Mahomes already. But don't worry about listening to me during the show. That's fine.
That's okay.
Just listen to me when I talk about bye weeks. That's the only thing that matters.
You talk a lot, Colm. I can't listen to all of it.
I talk a lot. I know that is very, very true. So that's a fair point you've made there. So
I'm obviously only teasing. You did make that point. I'd forgotten.
I would be open to beyond ADP here. Obviously, you're looking at things, but it's not actually much beyond it. But he's generally going in this here particular format in the early 10th, 10:03. We would be picking here now at 11:05. Oh, Sean takes Jared Goff. That drafter with the TJ Hawkinson, Amon-Ra roster with no quarterback, I'm sure is furious. My pick here, unless we were going for a running back and we're back on the clock, Blake Corum would have been one of the potential.
I think it's an easy Tua here.
I think it's a no-brainer. We're talking about smash picks, and I know it's around after ADP, but I think this is a clear smash probably a two quarterback build here moving forward. And that gives you a lot of roster flexibility now. You basically are getting yourself 1 to 2 additional roster spots here to make your selections moving forward. I
think that gives us a lot of roster flexibility. What do you think?
I don't. It was just on the tip of my tongue. I was about to.
That was a joke.
I know. That was good. Good comedic timing. Jaleel McLaughlin, though, was somebody who I would have been interested in coming back to us. He gets drafted by the team in 7. I'm looking forward to looking into some of these boards after it's over, because the team in 7 did go Amon-Ra, Chris Olave, Malik Neighbors, Rashee Rice, Josh Jacobs, Xavier Worthy, Christian Watson, Hollywood Brown, Brian Robinson, TJ Hawkinson, and then Jaleel McLaughlin. So that is a pretty fun roster to kick things off. It is a little bit risky I'm looking at drafting TJ Hawkinson a lot, but you kind of are looking for it as a luxury pick. I know that's something me and Conor had talked about, where you have a roster assembled. Like, this is a roster here with Chase Brown that I think you could take a Nick Chubb pick on, but the concern is you would be then having it built up with Brooks and Chubb. So if it was a case that we had went, Chase, Tyjae Spears, then I think you kind of can take that luxury pick and fill out the rest of the roster later. Whereas when that's your first tight end or first running back in the case of Chubb or Hawkinson, there's obviously some other.
I'm not a big fan of the 7 of their build. Like, obviously they've taken lots of players that we target. And so like it from that element. But 7 receivers through 8, and then they do have a little bit of going on at running back. But pretty big reach for McLaughlin, and
it was. Yeah,
I target McLaughlin a lot too, but there you've almost taken points off your team because you're they probably would have gotten McLaughlin at 12.06.
I think they would.
Yeah,
it's a pretty aggressive build, and I think it could work out. The one part, obviously, you don't need stacking teams out, but Patrick Mahomes went at the 412 in this draft. That was at the point after he had taken Rashee Rice, he or she, obviously. But then in the 6th round, they did take Worthy, and we would have been like probably right at ADP. They're only 2 picks ahead of us, so that's a fine pick. They do take Hollywood Brown, so there's a lot, and that would, obviously investing in the Chiefs is a smart way to play things out here as well. But I think that there's a little bit of fragility, that there's a lot of ways that they need to hit down the stretch here to make that work. And part of that kind of trying to hit is probably having to reach on certain players to make sure they don't get caught out of positions. But reaching then on Jaleel, who's their 3rd running back, probably isn't the way to do it. But look, we reach on players at times as well, so that we can't be hypercritical of that. But I just think that maybe it's a little bit too much of a push. But I still think they can salvage it, but I think there's some question marks around it. There's some very interesting teams in the room. There's some teams that I would like. There's no chance that I would draft if I'd done like 7,000 of these drafts this year. But each to their own, and we could also be completely wrong.
There's many ways to draft.
There is, but
you're right.
One of those ways.
Know all of the best ways, but
we just know the one best way.
We're giving our opinion.
Yeah, we only know the one best way. We don't know all the best ways. We just need to know the one that works. And that's all completely sarcastic for people listening in. But we do. One of the things I do think is a way to gain an advantage in drafts is how you go with the quarterback position. And we talked through it, basically in the last 15 minutes. We take Jonathan Brooks. The pick then by ADP, if you were really looking to build out that 49er stack, would have been Brock Purdy. He's going at the 902, so that would have been, he's going at the 910. So we would have had to take him at that point, and you pass him through, and you get him, 8 to 9 picks after ADP, and then you also pass through. You have to make a decision on what you want, but you make a decision to pass through at 2 as pick, and you get him then, 12 to 14 picks after ADP, and I think that is an area where you can get a big advantage. You may miss out on those stacks, but you also, like the way we drafted those opening rounds, give us flexibility to take it in certain directions. And that means then that we have been able to get Chase Brown and Brooks, where you may have had to consider going for those quarterbacks. And that's an area where I think that people sometimes miss out on some of the prime 0 RB targets when they're doing these drafts, is taking quarterback and not being willing to risk it to get around here. Like, we could have missed out on both of those. But the more of these drafts you do and the more times you push it, like we already talked, the next fallback was going to be Geno Smith. There's ways to work it out. And if we didn't do that then, we would have had Bo Nix, and then we would have added in Broncos later. There's a lot of ways to play it, but it's just having all those kind of jigsaw or Tetris pieces in your head as to how the rest of the board is going to play out to allow you to make those kind of decisions. So we are in a case now, since we took our pick, Justin Herbert's the only quarterback that has gone off the board. Kirk Cousins will be the next quarterback up. We don't have to worry about quarterback. I know one of your favorite guys to draft this year in terms of the smash plays is Zach Charbonnet. So it'll be brilliant if he makes it a couple of picks. He would be my preferred selection here. But our fallback is probably, actually, you know what I'm going to do? That drafter did unveil himself to say that he is in spot 4. So No, I will not reveal who I would like to get back to me in the following round. And he won't get back to us because I would expect Sean Siegel in spot 3 to draft him.
The guy that we want here will not make it back, unfortunately.
But Charbonnet would be the preferred option, and I do think the names you have in the queue are all the top targets here. I mentioned Wicks earlier. Somebody I like to draft if I've maybe not got the wide receivers through those first 7 rounds. Somebody, though, based on this build that isn't absolutely essential, and I would be happy to take one of those 2 running backs ahead of him here. So if they were gone, he would be the decision, and then if he was able to sneak his way back, he would be in play. It is interesting, though, because, and I think I know what's happening. I think we'll take our player here. You tell us why he's one of your most owned players this season.
So we've got 2 of them in this team. 2 of my most owned players are Zach Charbonnet and Chase Brown. Couple of reasons for Chase Brown is that, well, early in the offseason he was going much cheaper. Does have that kind of prototype running back build. Did get a very heavy workload final year of college. And then also the Bengals are just a clear target for running back points, where the way that they play, the way that they target their running backs, the way that they move the ball most seasons, means that they also get a lot of red zone looks. They generate a lot of running back points. So Chase Brown, definitely one of those big targets. And then Zach Charbonnet, where he's going after Ezekiel Elliott, he's going after J.K. Dobbins, he's going after Trey Benson, Nick Chubb. So people are very nervous about the coaching staff praise for Kenneth Walker, but Charbonnet is like he's last year he started off not getting a lot of touches and then worked his way into a very important role, and so you have a pretty good chance of him starting off in a committee and having good standalone work, which is that kind of mix of youth and standalone work with the elite contingent upside of that he provides. It's just not. It shouldn't be around in this stage of the draft.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you said there. The other part I'm interested to find out. One of my probably not most drafted, but somebody I'm willing to make that detour to the running back position for. And I mentioned earlier about some of the stuff that I'm kind of doing in the Superflex format where running backs are a little bit more valuable. That would be more where I'm targeting them. But I find Kenneth Walker very, very interesting as well. Is he somebody along with Charbonnet? It's a bit like we talked about earlier with Javonte and Jaleel. They're 2 of my most heavily drafted running backs. I know that we did a team where you thought that we needed both of those guys on the same roster. So we have that one team with both Broncos on it. But have you been drafting much Walker or no?
So I have a little bit, but in this format at this price,
it's hard in this. Much harder in this format.
When are we ever taking Kenneth Walker over T. Higgins, Zay Flowers? It's just
never.
Not going to happen very often, right? Whereas in Superflex, and if you pushed QB, and you've gotten a couple of receivers, then you're reasonably only starting, and so the player you were talking about that you hope make it back was Jalen Wright, obviously, because we built that way,
and he even fits in like perfect with the fact that it's also now a Dolphins roster, right. So you get a little bit of that potential correlation with those 2. Tua gets a passing touchdown to him at some point. The other players that I thought this was going. I was very surprised that Sean, and obviously is Kyle Pitts, so he takes Kirk Cousins, who is falling below ADP at that point, gets Jared Goff and Kirk Cousins on that roster. I was a little bit surprised that was the pick at that point, because I was thinking that he would want to get Dontavian Wicks and Jerry Jeudy on that roster. I was hoping that Jeudy may have snuck his way back to us, but I didn't think he was getting past Sean. Wicks went to the drafter at the 101. Sean took Kirk Cousins, Jerry Jeudy. But we now, to have a recap more so looking at our team, started with Tyreek Hill, Dalton Kincaid, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, then T. Higgins, JSN, Rome Odunze, Chase Brown, Jonathan Brooks, Brock Purdy, Tua, Zach Charbonnet, Jalen Wright. So we're up to 4 running backs with 2 rookies. Another couple of not young running backs, but potentially ascending running backs. And then we've got 2 elite tight ends.
We've all rookies and second year players.
Yeah.
I love our team so far. I think the way this has played out for us has been really nice.
Yeah, it's been really nice in a room where we know that a lot of people may have similar targets. Like the team in 11 who I mentioned earlier, they went with their last 4 picks with Tyjae Spears, Devin Singletary, Nick Chubb, J.K. Dobbins, and they're all running backs that I would be kind of targeting in this range. But when we look through the entire board, we, along with them, are really, the heaviest running back drafters between rounds 8 and between rounds 11 where we are, or 13, sorry, where we are at this point. So I think those rounds have played out relatively well for us. I thought it could be extremely aggressive towards the running backs, and I think it's worked out pretty well for us there. And I did mention actually that, us and them, but I have to mention the team at 4 as well. They did take 4 running backs with Zamir White, Rico Dowdle, Blake Corum, and Tyler Algier in that stretch as well. So a couple of teams, with similar approaches leaning into the running backs there. Ray Davis goes off at the 13-11, followed by Chuba Hubbard. So I think we're set up really well. The one part that could get a little bit tricky, a player I would have mentioned if it got to, is Polk. I know you like some of them Patriots. He goes off the board early in the 14th. We are really here in around a really rich 0 RB range. Geno Smith would be coming up, but I think we're set here at 2 QBs unless somebody completely drastically falls and we get a completely flat zone.
Right.
I feel like we have to look.
For us is a true luxury pick.
Yeah, I feel like we have to be hoping that Braylon Allen or Bucky Irving probably come to us, add some more rookie firepower to our running back room.
Or maybe Tyrone Tracy.
That was one where I thought that I had clicked to add somebody to the roster, and sometimes the name disappears that quick because somebody just selected him, but it was just that I hadn't actually added him to the queue. I thought we lost Braylon Allen there. Tyrone Tracy is there, Marshawn Lloyd's there, lots of running back names, and it almost feels to me like this is an area where you want to get 2 more additional of those guys and then start to see if we can pick off. It's a very narrow path. I feel like when we get into the wide receiver position in these double-digit rounds, there's a limited amount of names that I'm looking to add to the roster, but there is, in a couple of rounds' time, a few players that I think have huge upside, and hopefully we can get to draft them and talk about them a little bit more. Probably have 6 names throughout these next 6 rounds that I actually want to draft. So we are back up. We have the option here.
I'm pretty light on Braylon Allen.
Let's go. He's not get whoever you don't take here is not coming back. So pick which one you want to add to the roster.
Right. I understand the dynamic that
you are aware.
At least 2 of these 3 remaining players has Sean's name on them.
Yeah. So yeah, we are now. I'm just going to highlight this. We are now up to 1, 2, 3, 4 week 12s. I think we're okay. I like to just tell Connor about the bye weeks that we have accumulated. Interesting running back.
The bye weeks.
Yeah, interesting running back room where people will look at it and say there's potential lack of definitive scoring in it, and that is very fair. But there is also, the backloaded rookie kind of explosions that we could see on this team. Obviously, Braylon Allen, we want to see him have standalone value. I don't want to see anything happen to Breece Hall, but it's the same with Wright. It's the same with Charbonnet. I think they all can factor in and have work. And I think that Jonathan Brooks leads that backfield as we, get to the midseason. So those early running back points, we're just hoping to get enough to get us by. But I do think that we have 5 very interesting running backs in this RB room. Bucky Irving did go to Sean Siegel and spot 3.
Colm.
Go for it.
So Jordan Mason, he made a particular list, and he goes just after Sean takes Bucky Irving. He wouldn't be on the list at 14-11, I don't think.
No. Do you think it's because he's on the list or because somebody likes him?
I don't think Tegrity Farms is reading RotoViz, unfortunately.
Yeah, there is a chance, but the team that has been assembled is not probably. Yeah, so there is that sort of case. For anyone wondering, the 0 RB list came out this week. It is up on rotoviz.com, split into 3 parts. Sean Siegel's top 15 zero RB names. I would recommend check that out. Tyrone Tracy is somebody who's after going off at the 1502, but we drafted him a week or so ago. It was actually the day that the injury occurred, and I think we'd him drafted for like 25 seconds before you messaged me to say that he had got hurt, but thankfully it wasn't as bad as it was first feared at that particular time.
Yeah. We were we're like, oh shit, that guy's already out for the year, because they said, oh yeah, they brought out the air cast and all that kind of stuff, and he was back practicing in like a couple of days.
Yeah. So that was interesting. We are now back up here. Lots of quarterbacks go in this range. We don't need any of those, I think, on this roster. Khalil Herbert would be a name.
Consider somebody not a running back. Would be
Wandale.
What's that?
Wandale. Do you want me to pitch my tight end that I talk about all the time? Do you want to go tight end here? Well, tight end would be Greg Dulcich, but I think that we can pass and see if he comes back.
No.
We have this battle all the time. Nobody likes Greg Dulcich except for me in this entire world. It feels like that is the case. We are on the clock, though, so rather than talk about other things, I think Herbert would make a smart sense on this roster. I've been drafting Roshan more, but Wandale would be who would be your non-QB or non-running back pick?
Probably Pop Douglas or Gesicki, but I think Herbert is the pick.
Yeah, Herbert. Let's go Herbert. And I think at Herbert then, we can talk through the strategy element here. We're pretty close, I feel like, to nearly done at the running back position. So
because now you mentioned some concern about our week one and early week points on this team with the types of players we've selected. But I think we have to factor in, or we have to hope that Chase Brown gets us solid early.
Oh yeah, I wasn't concerned about him out of the concerned names.
But so that's one spot taken care of, and then Khalil Herbert. Actually, they just said, hey, in the last couple of weeks with Roshan injured, Khalil Herbert has now solidified himself as the running back 2, and so we do hope that he gives us a little bit of standalone value, and then between the rest of the guys, hopefully we have just enough there that it gets us into the playoffs, and then our kind of like upside can play out.
Tell me why you dislike Greg Dulcich so much. Can you confirm those rumors?
I mean, the rumors. I don't think it's rumored that anybody dislikes Greg Dulcich. I think it's confirmed fact that everyone dislikes Greg Dulcich. So I think that Adam Troutman is the starting tight end. They showed us that last year. They showed us that last year in preseason. They showed us that this year again in preseason. Blocking is a very important component of tight end play for Sean Payton.
Was Jimmy Graham a good blocker? No,
he was not. But that was a long number of years ago.
That was when Sean Payton was at his peak, and I would imagine he still has some of those same philosophies that he would like to implement now.
Well, then why? Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. He did utilize Jimmy Graham. However, when you talk through his his press conferences, when you talk through his player usage, like he wants the tight end who can block.
Well, the part I would like, there's fair enough you want to block and tight end, but I would also say that like Greg Dulcich spent the vast majority, like almost 90% of last season on injured reserve. I think that there was a limited opportunity to have an impact. I could be completely wrong on this, but I'm looking for tight ends at this point that have like the athletic upside to be smashes at the tight end position, and he is one of the few here.
But I think, and I say this gently, I think there's a potential that you may have locked in on just one guy who meets those attributes, when there are actually a couple of players with the athletic upside to hit those.
Well, you mentioned Mike Gesicki. Mike Gesicki, who I would have passed on here for Dulcich, is my most drafted tight end this year. So this is the other. I do have a kind of a bet about Greg Dulcich, but I also think that he is an elite athlete. And I think that because he missed his second season through injury, I think that we're forgetting about him. And I think that when we look at the names that go at the tight end position from this point on, and I do also like Greg Dulcich was much cheaper a couple of weeks ago. But, when we look at the names that are available here, again, like I talked about with wide receiver, there's a very limited number of those who's making that jump to be in the top 10 rounds at the tight end position next season. Like, I think that Dulcich has the potential to be in that Dalton Schultz, Pat Firemouth range, which is the 9th round in this draft next season. He does go before he gets back to us, so you're saved in this particular draft, Conor, from drafting him. And again, it could be a player that I'm completely wrong about. I think that when I'm on a podcast, I play a role of being Greg Dulcich's biggest fan. I don't think I'm locked in because he's like right in the middle of the players that I'm, highest drafted at the tight end position. We got a good little run out of Dulcich there for 2 or 3 minutes to get us back to the pick. We're trying to fill some airtime.
Fill airtime here.
But the player that I do want,
that's all he's good for.
Yeah, the player that I do want here. And one of the reasons I was good with drafting Herbert there, your point about the early season work makes sense. Roschon is actually one of my more heavily drafted running backs, but he did go earlier in this draft. Will Shipley was somebody who I would have liked, but I was ready here to pass on the running back position when I got back here. I feel like the 2 wide receivers in our queue are the clear options, and there's
4 wide receivers in it.
Well, the top 2, I think, by ADP. The 3 names that are there are all the top. I'm good with all 4 of those. The top 3.
I like Leggett.
Okay.
Because we did start our draft very strong at receiver. We do have the double elite tight end, so it's going to be hard for players to if this
crack the
lineup
to
crack the lineup. So I do want somebody with that kind of upside.
And do you think out of them names that we have there, he is the most upside? He is also the highest by ADP outside of Jahan Dodson.
Yeah.
So okay, I'm willing to go that way. So my take lock has been deactivated here by Drew. I do have some Leggett sprinkled in, basically just to balance things out a little bit in this range. But he would be my least out of those guys.
Okay.
I won't name the names, but the second name in the queue, the third name in the queue, and then the first name in the queue would be the order normally. And I would probably take the guy that we drafted there in Leggett over the guy who's top of the queue. The player who I really like is number 3. I think the upside is immense. We will reveal these numbers that we're talking about in a minute. And I think that
I almost want to reveal it just because I actually really don't want them.
And so do you not?
I do want number 3 to get drafted.
Okay. Do you want to reveal it then? We won't draft. If you really don't like him, we won't draft him. But his name is Jalen Tolbert, and I feel like again we're looking at the Dallas Cowboys offense and which players have a chance to be just completely mispriced. Most people are obviously drafting Jake Ferguson, who goes in this draft, obviously tight end premium, but goes in the 5th round. CeeDee Lamb obviously at the top of the board, but I think that Jalen Tolbert has a chance this season to be the second leading target in this offense. I could see him getting into that 70 to 90 targets this season in this offense, and I think people are just.
He does have to be good to get there.
He has to be good. That is part of trying to get targets, but he also has such limited competition, and we don't necessarily know that he isn't good. I think that's a big call to make after the sample size.
Well, what then? My question would be, why is the sample size so small? When they've historically not had.
Well, the other name that's here, right? The other name that's in our list here is a Denver Bronco. And if we look at him, his sample size is small with a huge splash at the start of it. Why did that sample size disappear? There's sometimes, these things take time to work out, and it may never work. It's the same with Wendell Robinson, who's at the top of the queue. They all have question marks. That's why they're going at this point. But if we're looking at the offense,
Wendell Robinson, he at least plays. He works himself into the starting lineup at a relatively early point in his career. So encouraged by that. Whereas Jalen Tolbert, like from the very beginning, it's like, oh yeah, this guy, he's like our 6th best receiver. Like there's no chance he's playing as a rookie.
There was a lot more competition as a rookie as well.
Who was the competition?
For the cow, I'm going to have to go back and look at the
right. Yeah. We don't need that much.
And he did get drafted too here, so you're lucky with that one as well. The player that I would have drafted at the last turn, I think, on a solo draft may have been Robinson, and I also think that Mims would have pushed me to draft him based on the correlation to the Bengals. I'm perfectly
happy to take Wandale here. I think he's a fine pick.
I'm happy to take him too. You don't want the correlation with the Broncos and the Bengals? No, it doesn't matter. I don't think it matters as much here.
No, I mean I am happy to take Mims, but
I think
I prefer Wandale at this point.
Okay, let's go for it. That was the player that I was hoping got this in the last round, so I'm pleasantly surprised that he's made it all the way back through.
Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned about Mims, where like you don't want to read too much into preseason sort of snaps and usage, but when you already have a coach who's been willing to just not play Mims, that
was again. You know when I was making the
you were saying like how can you like Mims when you don't like Joan Tolbert, and fair comment. I'm actually starting to get a little bit concerned about Mims, where he didn't play as much as we felt he should have last year. When he did play, his per snap usage was not great. And then the coach during the offseason makes the comments, I like big receivers. I want them. I want them to be big. And Mims is not big. And then the preseason snap usage is not what you want. And to be honest, I'm willing to look through that to some degree. I am, but it does make me just a little bit more hesitant, and more willing to take somebody like Leggett, like Robinson, where Leggett he's the mystery box, but he is the high drafted rookie, and then Wandale, I know they're going to play that guy. I know he's going to play. The team might not be very good, but I know he's playing.
Well, that is true. The team also will probably not be very good in that situation. So we are down now to the last couple of picks here that we will be making. We have 3 selections left. We have 2 quarterbacks, 2 tight ends, up now to the 6 running backs and 7 wide receivers. So I think we're very balanced. We have a number of ways we could play it. And I think getting those additional 2 wide receivers there has really started to shape this up. You obviously didn't want Greg Dulcich. We had a number of other names then obviously go off the board, but not many tight ends. Gesicki, Dulcich, Theo Johnson, Zach Ertz, and Hayden Hurst. There's a couple of late round guys that I'm interested in here, and you've added one of them to the queue. The other one,
2 of them, and then the other guy just went.
That was Tucker Kraft.
Yeah.
We do have. I'm adding it. Every time I try to add a player, it's jumping it up the queue. But there's another player who we're kind of getting involved in an offense here as the draft has gone along, that may fit in as well here for us. So, how are you feeling though? I think we probably do need at least one more tight end. I don't necessarily think we need to get up to 4, but if the board fell in a certain way, again, as I talked at the start, you could play 2 tight ends per week in this 3 tight ends with the flexes. So that could be an option. The name I was talking about just did go before we were about to make the pick. That was Jatavion Sanders. How do you feel here about, obviously you're getting a discount on Mims, but the next one then would be the other tight end that you've added to the queue here.
Yeah, I think with Theo Johnson gone, Hayden Hurst going, Tucker Kraft going, Sanders going, I think if we want to get a tight end, we take them here, and I think it is Michael Mayer.
Yep, that's the pick. It went from little movement to a quite aggressive, because I was thinking we were going to have a choice between those 3 at our pick. Tucker Kraft went early in this round, then Sanders went 1 pick, then Mayer. We had obviously started to pick up some Broncos and Leggett and also Jonathan Brooks. I think Sanders again has that profile of player who could really jump up. I do think there's a limitation, obviously, on Michael Mayer as to how far he could. If we're projecting ahead to next year's draft, the tricky part for him is that he's going to be roadblocked by, which we think is one of the best tight end prospects ever to enter the NFL, and he's not going away anywhere outside of serious injuries. So that is the concern. I do think, though, you can get those flash weeks from Mayer. He came into the league last year with a very interesting profile, somebody that we really like coming out of college. So having him there, but I think Sanders is
I think that the Raiders will probably be top 2 or 3
and 2 tight ends. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons as well that I'm interested in Kraft, because I think that the Packers will run some 2 tight ends, but I also think that there will be times where either him or Musgrave is on the field, taking. I think there'll still be a bit of a rotation there. So I think there's the upside. And again, you're looking at the athleticism of these guys, and they're at the higher end. Like Tucker Kraft is pretty insane. So they're at the high end.
He got a lot of positive buzz yesterday, right?
Yeah,
where they said he caught 6 passes. He was one of the major targets, and he looked great.
He's a guy too, like with both Packers tight ends. I think this is true with, run after the catch ability as well. So it's not necessarily like there's multiple ways that they can be used and have that success. And kind of like although the volume doesn't be there for him, and George Kittle, who we drafted in this draft, multiple ways where the success can be had with him at tight end. So they're interesting, but I think both of those have very stiff competition, whereas I think Sanders could have a clear path to tight end 1 workload as well. But tight end 1 workload in the Panthers offense is something that it's hard to know how valuable it's going to be. We talked about Mims, and it feels like everyone else in the draft room has heard what we were saying. If Mims makes it here another round, is there?
We can take Mims here. You won't get any pushback from me.
If he makes it, he's usually getting drafted in the 16th round. We didn't miss any serious injury news or anything since we started recording this one.
No injury news. He's about a round after ADP now, so he normally goes in the 18th on FFPC. I think people just don't like him as much as you do.
Okay, we might have different dates pulled up. I'm seeing him as a 16th round pick, but we will agree that he's after EP. That would be the easiest way to look at it. Any other names that you're looking to pitch in here, and what do you want to do the rest of the way? I mentioned we might be finished at running back. Any interesting names here that you want to look at, or
I'm a little bit stumped. I think Labe would have been somebody who was interested in as a backup, but I would have been a bit stumped. But I'm more than happy to do Mims here.
Yeah, I think for all the reasons that you said that he was no good, I think we should draft him here just to give him some confidence before the end of the show here.
Well, I've never. I don't think it's because. Well, Paul is watching the stream. We know that, so maybe we can thank me shitting on him for Paul passing on him.
That may be the difference maker. But yeah, I think again another piece to add. Like we're looking on some impact weeks just for these particular names, and I think that Robinson and Mims fit that particularly well with the top end guys. But yeah, we're now up to 8 wide receivers, 3 tight ends, 2 quarterbacks, 6 running backs. Basically, best player available when it comes back here in the 20th round is the outlook. Laube would have been an interesting name. He went 1 pick before, but I still think with the way things were falling, that may have been the direction to play it as it came back through. I'm just going to see what comes back. There's a lot of names here. We could even reach down. I know we've done this in a few of our drafts, like reaching down for some of those undrafted players and adding them into the roster to try and bump things a little bit interestingly. But yeah, there's not a huge amount of excitement left in these 20th rounds, and the reason for that is
I've got an idea. What about the guy I just put in? He's getting a little bit of buzz.
I think he went, did he?
No. He's still in the queue.
Okay, yeah. That would fit.
The guy who just went would have been interesting too.
That he was the one that I was starting to think about considering. That would work.
Washington would have been good with our Chua stuff.
Yeah. There's a little bit as well of that name that you've added to the queue that could be not necessarily insurance, but there's an element of still fits in, but if something happened, it could help with losing a player potentially as well. I think that if he did happen to sneak through, would be interesting. See these drafts like this. I don't think there's upside enough in it, but if you were really pushing quarterback, a name like I don't think in our team we need it, but Aidan O'Connell's now pretty much going undrafted in this format, and I still think that he probably at some point this season ends up as the starter for the Raiders.
He'll play. Yeah. He's very likely to play.
I think in a team that you've really pushed QB to the limit, I think he could be an interesting pick down in this range as well.
He's probably a great superflex pick. He's probably a fantastic superflex pick.
He is, but I don't, because of it being superflex format, he's not dropping as far as I think people are building that in. He was a player though that when the job was in question, I was drafting him, so I have a decent bit in superflex of O'Connell, but he's obviously cheaper now. But it's more a case that Minshew has jumped up a couple of rounds and he's gone down one or two rather than he's completely cratered. Because when you get to that, well, Sam Howell in this draft, but when you are in this range, that's where those guys are kind of being picked up, and that's where it makes a little bit of a question, I guess. Sam Howell's a 20th round pick in Superflex tournament, so then picking him as in this particular draft was a QB4 in the 20th round, a team that has Watson, Bo Nix, now Sam Howell, along with Geno Smith. I don't think it's probably necessary, but again, they could be looking at that as insurance on Geno Smith, because if you look at the competition around the teams, maybe he can surpass Smith this season. I would be more likely to be drafting Jameis Winston in that situation.
Right, yeah. But you also wouldn't be taking Deshaun Watson.
That's very true. That's factual. The player that you were hinting at was Jacob Cowing of the San Francisco 49ers. I think when we're looking at some dart throw upside plays at this point of the draft, I think he fits in. There's not any running backs that I'm looking here that I'm like, yeah, I need to add that last running back. I know you've Edwards-Helaire in the queue, so he's probably at a pinch, the one that you'll be looking at. But do you want to go wide receiver here? Are you happy with the 6 running backs?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the way to go. I think that's a pretty fun pick here. I said there was no fun picks, but when I was about to say there's no fun picks, the reason for that is we're now in a situation where the players that were going in the 19th and 20th round, I mentioned Dulcich earlier and we talked about him, and I know you're not on him and I like him, but he was a player who was like a 19th round pick, a deeper player, and we're seeing a lot of those names, even a Tolbert a couple of weeks ago was much more readily available in the 19th round. So we're seeing the names that were down at the bottom moving their way up a little bit, and that's changing.
And then some of the players that I enjoyed, I used to pick Devontae Walker very frequently, and I'm much more uncomfortable drafting him now. Same with George Franklin. Yeah,
the reason for that, if there's not positive buzz, they're obviously pulling up, but there is drafts like this where we took Cowing. If it was a Bo Nix team, for example, I would be interested in still adding Franklin to those rosters. But that gets us to the end of this particular draft. We've ended up, I think, with a really interesting team here, Conor, in terms of we've Brock Purdy into a 2-quarterback team, both at discounts in the 10th and 11th round. Chase Brown, Jonathan Brooks, Zach Charbonnet, Jalen Wright, Braylon Allen, Khalil Herbert at running back. And then we have Tyreek Hill, Deebo Samuel, T. Higgins, JSN, Odunze, Xavier Legette, Wendell Robinson, Marvin Mims, Jacob Cowing, and then at tight end, Dalton Kincaid, George Kittle, and Michael Mayer. And something that, we joked about a few times and we talk about a lot, at the onesie positions, we have no crossover in bye weeks. And then even at the wide receiver, there's a couple of week 9s, obviously, because we have 2 49ers. There's a couple of week 12s and there are a couple of week 11s. And then at the running back position, we have 2 week 12s in Braylon Allen, Chase Brown, but the rest, there's no crossover. So for a team, putting it together, there's very little crossover across the board here with this roster, which makes it a lot of fun. I'm pretty stoked with how this one turned out. What about you?
Yeah, I think we drafted a really strong team here. Really strong. Very balanced. And then we've got upside at at every position, pretty much.
Yeah, so I think we can cash that check. I think we're in a pretty good spot. Looking at Sean's team, just
$137 of EV right here.
Yeah, we're stepping forward. Well, we do have stiff competition in this room. We mentioned some of the stuff earlier. So looking at Sean's team, for example, it's a Bijan Robinson, Kyron Williams team with Bucky Irving, Kamami Vidal, Kendry Miller, Audric Estime, Miles Sanders, Isaac Garendo. So for people who've been listening to RotoViz Overtime or Stealing Bananas over the last couple of months, a lot of those running backs have been coming up. Kyle Pitts, Brock Bowers. I'm going to have to ask him about the Luke Musgrave pick, because I have been talking about Luke Musgrave over Tucker Kraft, and he's gone the route here and taken Luke Musgrave as the third tight end. So I'll have a fun conversation with him about that on RotoViz OT. Took Dawson Knox then in the second last round. And then it's Tank Dell, Jaden Reed, Keenan Allen, Jameson Williams, Jordan Addison, Jerry Jeudy. So an interesting team built in a different way to us. You can see the strengths more so at running back for him, wide receiver for us. But I think it's an interesting build as well. But Conor, any final thoughts? Anything you want to promote? We are going to do another draft if the draft fills later on tonight. But that one, due to us streaming this, we want to give some exposure to the shows when we do them rather than just drop them back to back. So we will record that and drop it maybe even on Monday as the show there. But myself and Sean did an FFPC main event. That show will be dropping on Saturday on the RotoViz YouTube channel, I believe. It's already up on the RotoViz Overtime podcast feed. So lots of podcasts coming your way. But Conor, anything to hype here, anything to talk about other than this team and getting to draft again with me hopefully later today?
Really excited about this team. Really excited about drafting another one with you. I am working on a quarterback article, hoping to push either this weekend or next week. So that something to look out for. But thanks for having me on today, Colm.
No problem. It's always fun, Rico, to have these drafts and to have the conversations. And you can obviously, we've done a lot of slows and we know the players we kind of like, but even, we've kind of had these questions maybe we want to pitch to each other when we're messaging back and forth, but you can't really, get into the details. It's a bit boring.
Yeah. Having the conversation.
Yeah, the context isn't necessarily there, but yeah, always fun. Love doing these drafts along with you and the rest of the RotoViz team and friends in the industry. So lots more. It is very close to the start of the NFL season, so wishing everyone the best in their final drafts. I know there's another couple of weeks, but people I know are starting to max enter BBM 5 and so on, so good luck in that. But that's going to do it for this edition of the show. You can follow me on Twitter at Overtime Ireland. You can follow Conor over at Draco Out. And until we are back, have a good one.